now we've installed VirtualBox, if we run the VirtualBox application, what we should get is this small window that comes up, which is the manager for VirtualBox. And what we need to do is to create a new virtual machine. So we click on the new, which will bring us up a very useful wizard, which will guide us through virtually everything we need to do. So first we need to name the machine. So I'm going to call this Ubuntu 64, and you'll see as I've typed that in, it's said, oh, Linux, and it's Ubuntu 64 in the OS type there, so it's actually picked it up for us, which will help to configure a few base settings. Now next we have to give the amount of RAM that we want to be allocated to the virtual machine. Now at the moment it's quite a small amount, and we can sort of drag it up to a reasonable size. Now I've got 8 gig on this machine, and if I'm using Ubuntu I'm going to most probably be using that rather than the Mac side of things. So I'm going to allocate 4 gig of RAM to start with, which should give me a reasonable performance. Now it could be we can come back and change this later if we need to tweak a few things. And click on continue. Now it's saying the recommended size of the startup disk is 8 gigabytes. That's basically going to use a chunk of our hard drive as the virtual hard drive for our virtual machine that we're running. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a new hard disk and continue from there. And then it asks about the creation of the disk. We're just going to create a VirtualBox disk image, which is the default one. We'll also, if we make it dynamically allocated, if we do run out of space, it will try and resize it. And obviously this is dependent on how much free space on the host hard drive. So we're almost ready here now. It says please type the name of the new virtual disk file into the box below, or click on a folder icon to select a different folder to create in. So you can see we can click there and choose, for example, if we've got a different hard drive, external drive or something we want to use it on, we can do that. In this case I'm going to use the default, call it Ubuntu 64, and you can see that it's got 8 gigabytes there. Continue. And now it says we're going to create the following disk. We tell it to create the disk. It's done that. And it says you're going to create a new virtual machine with all of these parameters that we've set, and we click on create. So what we've got now is basically a big dialog box here, and we're ready to, as it were, start the machine. Now if we start this now, what we should see is we just get an empty machine start up. It'll give you some indications of how auto capture keyboard and things work, so it's worth reading this. I have to press Alt and left to get out, and it says this is the first run, and it says select the media which contains the setup program of the operating system you wish to install. And what I can do is then I can go and look for a disk image that I want to boot from, and in this case I've stored it in the directory vbox, and you can see that I've got this ISO file here which has got my Ubuntu that I downloaded earlier on. Click on open. Now if I continue, it says you have selected the following media to boot from, CD-DV-ROM, and it's this ISO. So this is the software equivalent of physically putting the Ubuntu DVD into the hard drive. If I click on start now, we should get, you see the virtual machine is running, it's booting up. We've got this nice little setup here, which is going to be my Ubuntu box running. It'll take a little while it reads through the ISO and starts to boot up my Ubuntu box. And there you go. We now have Ubuntu booting up. Let's just make that slightly bigger. It's small at the moment because obviously it's got the screen resolution from the virtual machine. Eventually we can change all of these settings and everything else. We will now wait for the Linux box to boot, and then I'll do a video of going through the next settings because this does take a little while.